Is it a buyer's market or is it a seller's market? It is the beginning of the month, so you know this is the best time for us to analyze what is actually going on in the Atlanta housing market. Hey y'all, it is your favorite real estate agent, Dr. Yeti, and I am back with yet another video. Today we are going over the market analysis in Atlanta, and I'm super excited to show you guys how I come up with my statistics and what to look out for in the coming months. So let's get into it. Okay, so you see I got my glasses on. Let us get into it. Okay, so this is the first MLS, and I look at the statistics found on the MLS. First MLS is one of the MLSs in Georgia. And so I look at residential detached and residential attached, which is detached would be like your single family residences, and your attached would be townhomes and condos. So we're not looking at leases or income or land or anything like that. We're only looking for detached and attached properties. Next, we're looking at properties in Atlanta because we are focused on the Atlanta housing market right now. And now I do have my presets here, right? I have my average days on market, inventory, median house home price, and the number of sales. So the first thing we're going to look at is the average days on market. So let's look at that, and we can generate that. Now, why is the average days on market important? So depending on how long the homes are sitting on the market, especially compared to previous months, we can see whether or not sellers are able to sell their homes, or it's been sitting on the market for longer than usual. If it's been sitting on the market for less than usual, then we can see that yes, it's a seller's market or potentially a seller's market. It could be a potential indicator of a seller's market if the homes are not sitting on the market for over 60 days or so, right? If the houses are getting off the market compared to the previous months. Okay, so first things first, let's look at the chart, right? So the chart is showing us from January of 2025 all the way to September of this month. Now, we're not looking at September. Why? Because September, we only have 8 days in September. So the data on this is not going to be accurate. We're looking at from January to August, okay? So when we look at the data from January to August, we see that from January to April, the average days on market has been going down. But then from April to August, it started going back up. Now, we may conclude that maybe the days on the market have been going down because, these are ideal times to buy. And then, maybe it's the season or maybe the interest rates, whatever the case is. I'm going to go to the data really quickly. We see that in August, the houses have been sitting on the market for 73 days, which is high, right? Compared to the previous months. So July was 72. It was creeping up, as you can see, but it's higher than it's been since January. Okay. And so we remember that in January, interest rates were pretty high and was starting to come down. So I wonder why it's going back up in August, since the interest rates are kind of low compared to the rest of the year, right? Currently, let's look at interest rates right now. Let's search what interest rates are right now. So Freddie Mac says, Freddie Mac says that interest rate is on average 6.5%, which is low compared to the previous months. So if we look from January of this year to September of this year, we see that the interest rates have been going down. It has been going down. And we did notice here in April, right? Which is funny because it kind of correlates with what we saw, was that interest rates from January started going down. And then in April, it started going up a little bit. But then I'm interested in understanding why In May, interest rates started going down, but according to this, in May, the properties, well, to be fair, maybe the market needed some time to catch up, right? Because in May it started going down, interest rates started going down, but the average days on market in Atlanta, this is specifically in Atlanta, I'm not looking at the entire United States, the market started going back down. And then in May, the average days on market started going up. So I'm very curious to know why interest rates were going down, but then the days on market were increasing. That's something to keep in mind. Now, if we look at inventory, right? If we're going to calculate inventory, why is inventory important? Inventory is important because it kind of gives us a good picture of what we have on the market, what the supply is in the market for properties. If what we have right now in the market today, September 8th, is what we have in the market, we don't add any properties, we don't subtract any properties, how long would it take to get all of these properties sold? That is what an inventory is, right? The housing inventory tells us that the current properties on the market as we are speaking right now, how long would it take to sell all the properties if we don't take anything away or remove it or add anything to it? And in January, it was 7. And when we look at the overall picture, remember, don't add September. It says 86. It's only September 8th. So we can't look at this. We can't look at 86 months of inventory. That doesn't make any sense. But we noticed that from January to August, there's a range between 5 and 7. Right. And so in April, it was the lowest. And remember, I told you that the days on the market and inventory kind of correlate, right? Because if the houses have been sitting on the market for longer and you add more properties to the market, the inventory is going to grow, right? And so similar to what we see here, that the inventory has been increasing since April. April was the lowest, and then May all the way to August, it started going up. It went from 5 to 7. Now, what does this mean? Inventory is a strong indicator of whether or not it's a buyer's market or if it's a seller's market. If the houses have been sitting on the market for longer and the inventory is higher, right, there's more competition for the sellers, and the sellers want to sell their house. They want to sell. So what will they do? They'll be more likely to lower the prices, right? And now the buyers have more leverage to negotiate, right? They can offer less because, okay, this house has been sitting on the market for 200 days. I can offer less. I don't have to offer what you're asking, right? And we're going to see that in a little bit when we look at the sales price versus list price ratio. So now let's calculate the median home price. Let's look at what the median home price in Atlanta was for August. Median home price is important to understand. If the prices of the homes in Atlanta start to drop, that means that it may be pushing towards a buyer's market. And if it starts to go up, that means the sellers feel like they have more leverage to sell their houses for a lot more than than the previous months. So in this case, when we look at August, we see that the median home price in August was $420,000. Compared to the previous months, we see that in January it was 403, which was the lowest. And it makes sense, right? Because in January, the average days on market was pretty high, right? It was pretty high. And it was like 78 or something like that if we go back to the days on market. So it was pretty high. So it makes sense that the prices of the homes are lower because the sellers want to sell their homes. And then in February, it went up by like $16,000. And then went up again in March, and it went up again in April. And just like when we looked at the inventory and we looked at the days on market, we noticed that from April onwards, things started shifting, right? So in May, the home prices started going down. In July and June, it was kind of, $1,000 difference, not that significant of a change. So we started getting a stable 419, 420K. And of course, it's going to stay stable. This is like the in trading in stocks, we call that the zone of consolidation in trading, or a sideways move, right? In this case, in January, it was at 403, and then it shot up to 465, and then in May it went down, and then now it's a moving sideways. It's sideways movement. So the last 3 months has been a sideways movement. So I'm very curious to see what happens in September, because from what I'm seeing, based on what I'm seeing, it looks like the houses is going to start dropping. The home prices are going to start dropping. Why? If we look at inventory, we look at the days on market, we see that it's creeping up, right? The days on market are creeping up and the inventory is creeping up. It's going to be a little bit challenging for sellers to increase the prices of the homes if there's a lot of competition and a lot less sellers, right? But let's go back to this, right? If we see that the interest rates is 6.5%, and it's going down, right? It's going down from what it was the previous months. That could also make a turn of events where now we have more buyers in the market. And even though there may be competition for the sellers, they are still going to be able to find buyers for whatever price point. So this might mean that we are going to have a little bit more sideways movement, because the inventory is high, but the interest rates are starting to go down, right? Because initially it did look like it was heading towards a buyer's market, but if the interest rate starts to go down, the buyers are going to feel like they have an opportunity to hop in the market and purchase their home. All right, so let's go back. So now that we've looked at the median home prices, let's look at the number of sales. So now, why is the number of sales important? The number of sales are important so that we can know the movement, right? Are sales happening in the market? Are people actually buying? Are people able to sell their properties? So now, from what we can see this year, from January, the sales, just like when we looked at the days on market, the inventory, and the median home prices, we see that around April, something shifted. Something shifted around April. Okay, so January, the houses were 606 houses sold in January, right? Which was the lowest. February, it went up by 100, almost 100, right? March, it went up by over 100. April, almost 200, right? Home prices, number of sales went up, right? In May, it started to drop. Now we're in August and we only sold 774. And it looks like we're creeping back up to the January numbers or the February numbers. So a lot less homes have been getting sold. So now we see inventory is going up, days on market is going up, number of sales is going down, home prices are going down, right? Or at least right now it's consolidating. So it's kind of like stable, right? So what is this showing? At least based on these previous months, it's looking like buyers have more leverage, right? It's looking like a buyer's market. But remember, the interest rates are going down. So even though it looks like a buyer's market, it could mean that it's going to switch. We don't know. But right now, from what we're looking at, it is definitely giving buyer's market. Now let's look at the sales price versus the list price ratio. Why is this important? Basically, sales price versus list price ratio shows us what the house was sold for versus what it was listed for, right? We want to know what this house was sold for versus what it was listed for. So basically, the sale price versus list price in January is 97.5%. Basically that means that 97.5% of the homes on the market sold for what it was listed for. right? And so that was the lowest. Just like when you look at the other statistics that we looked at, right? We noticed that January was the worst month, right? January was the worst month altogether. It was the worst month for inventory. It was the worst month for houses sitting on the market. And now we see that it was the worst month for sellers, right? Because now the homes, if you listed the house for $100,000, people would buy the house for $85,000 because they didn't think it was worth $100,000 in January. February, it went up slightly. March, it went up by 1%, so that's good. So it went up in March. April, it was kind of stable, right? April, May, all the way to July, it was kind of around the same range. But now in August, it went down by a whole percentage point. So we see that sellers are willing to negotiate lower on their homes even more so now, right? They're willing to negotiate more on their homes, even more so now. So I want to know what you guys think based on the information that we see. We see that the average days on the market has been going up. The inventory has been going up. The median home price has been going down. The number of sales has been going down. And then we see that the sale to list price ratio has also been going down as well. But then the interest rates are also going down. So what are your thoughts? What do you think about what's going on right now? Now, here are my thoughts about the whole situation. I do believe that we are heading towards a buyer's market, but with the interest rates going down, that may mean that we may see some flip or some change that could occur where now we have more buyers in the market and the inventory starts to go down, but only time can tell, right? And when we talk about what happened in April and why the inventory started moving and shaking, well, if we look at the other previous years, we'll know that that's a seasonal thing typically that happens, because the spring season is typically when homes start selling and people start buying their homes, and people find more interest in buying a house around that time of the year. So it's not significant of a something to be cautious of. However, I will say that it is still something to keep an eye out for. And honestly, it was making sense as to why so many properties were being sold in April, because interest rates were at its lowest at that season, right? From January to April, interest rates were at its lowest, and then it started to rise, and now it's falling again. Now interest rates are lower than what it was in April. So it's so beautiful to do these things and run these numbers, because it shows us that there are so many factors that come into play when we are looking at interest rates and we're looking at the market, because we see that the interest rates affect the selling and the buying, but then we also notice that inventory in the season also affects the selling and the buying, right? Because if the inventory is higher, then people feel like, okay, we can negotiate more. We can see that the prices of the homes will be a little bit more lax. I love doing these things because one, I learn myself, right, as I'm running these numbers and I'm trying to correlate things and add things together. But also I love that I'm able to share with you guys, and I want to get your thoughts and your opinions. Why do you think the market is moving the way it is? It's very interesting to see, and I'm very curious to see what this month brings, because with the interest rates being as low as it is right now and the inventory being so high and the days on market being so high, I want to see this month what happens with the prices of the homes, and I want to see if the inventory ends up dropping and the properties on the market start to fly off the market, right? So I'm very curious to see, what are your thoughts? So if you were to ask me, should you buy a house right now? I would say absolutely jump on it. Interest rates are low. 6.5% is pretty low, and the inventory is pretty high, and we see that the days on market are pretty high, which means you are at a sweet spot, at a beginning stage where you can get a low interest rate and you can negotiate on the prices of the homes, because the sellers have been sitting on the market for a long time and they are ready to sell this house. This is like a sweet spot. And when we look at the numbers and we see like we are heading towards a season, right? Because we're heading into fall and winter season. Homes aren't really flying off the market like it usually does in the spring and summer seasons. So this is an ideal sweet spot. This is a sweet spot time for you to buy a house. And if you are looking to buy a house in the Atlanta metro area, my details are in the description below. Send me a message. And if you love this video, if this video helped you in any way, shape, or form, make sure you like this video. Make sure you share it with somebody that is interested in understanding what's going on in the Atlanta metro area. And make sure you subscribe to get more videos like these to teach you all about homeownership and all you need to know about the Atlanta housing market. So thank you so much for watching this video. I love you, and remember, God loves you even more. Bye.